What if I told you that the voice in your head isn't yours? That the stories you repeat to yourself, the ones about who you are, what you want, what you fear, may not have come from you at all. You were born into a world already spinning, already speaking, already sculpting. And before you could question it, you were given a name, a nationality, a religion, a role. You were handed beliefs dressed as truth, rituals masked as tradition, and identities stitched together by other people's expectations. And without knowing, you became the product of a silent inheritance, a psychological blueprint buried deep beneath your awareness. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious. He wasn't just speaking about shared symbols or mythological echoes. He was pointing to something far more dangerous, the idea that your entire identity could be constructed from the outside in, and you would never know. You see, the human mind isn't a blank slate. It's a battleground. And while you walk through life thinking you are making choices, what if most of your decisions are pre-programmed? What if your ambitions are borrowed, your fears installed? What if you've mistaken conditioning for free will? Jung's work wasn't simply about dreams or archetypes. It was about the invisible forces that possess us, not demons or spirits, but collective emotions, social pressures, generational trauma, and unconscious archetypes that whisper in our ear, until their voice becomes indistinguishable from our own. This isn't conspiracy, this is psychology, because until you see it, until you understand how your psyche has been wired, you are not living, you are being lived. And the scariest part? The more convinced you are that you're in control, the more deeply asleep you may be. So if you're still here, if you're willing to question what you've always called you, give me 18 minutes. Because Carl Jung didn't just map the mind, he gave us the tools to reclaim it. And once you see what's behind the mask, you can never unsee it. Carl Jung warned of something that most people ignored, because to face it would mean unlearning everything we think we know about ourselves. He believed the greatest threat to humanity wasn't war, disease, or even death. It was mass unconsciousness, the silent invasion of the individual mind by collective forces, not through violence or visible chains, but through ideas, ideologies, identities. The bigger the crowd, Jung once wrote, the more negligible the individual becomes. And in that crowd, the self begins to dissolve. Thought becomes imitation. Morality becomes obedience. And the individual, without realizing it, becomes possessed. But Jung's idea of possession didn't involve spirits or the supernatural. He meant something more insidious, that people can be psychologically overtaken by archetypes, universal patterns that lie beneath the surface of our culture and consciousness. These archetypes, when activated collectively, become psychological viruses. They don't just influence thought, they override it. Think about the 20th century. Ordinary people became executioners. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Flags and uniforms replaced personal morality. Jung watched this unfold in real time. He saw the rise of Hitler and Stalin not just as political movements, but as psychic epidemics, archetypal forces unleashed on a population that had stopped thinking for itself. In Nazi Germany, the archetype of the hero was fused with the shadow, a dangerous combination. The desire to save the nation turned into the obsession to purify it. Individual conscience was replaced by collective myth. Jung described these moments as eruptions of the collective unconscious, times when societies fall under the spell of their own inner demons, projected onto the world. And we think it couldn't happen again? Today, possession looks different. It's not boots on pavement, it's screens in our hands. Not posters on walls, but algorithms curating our reality. The same ancient forces are still at work. The tools have evolved. The programming is more subtle, but the outcome is the same. The loss of authentic self, the rise of the reactive self. We don't think, we scroll, we don't feel, we perform. And in the noise, we lose that rarest of things, inner silence. That sacred space where we can hear our own voice, not the echo of the culture. Jung's greatest warning wasn't just about dictators or regimes. It was about what happens when we let the outside world shape the inside world without resistance. When we trade awareness for comfort. When we stop questioning the voice that tells us who we should be. This is the invasion of the psyche. And the scariest part? Most people welcome it. They call it normal. They call it success. They call it being informed. But Jung knew better. He once said, "Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism." Because when the psyche is overtaken, even the purest intentions can become weapons. Even truth can be weaponized. Even goodness can become tyranny. Unless you know yourself, deeply, painfully, honestly. And that's where we go next. There's a part of you that you've never met. Not because it's hidden in some far corner of your mind, but because you've refused to look. Carl Jung called it the shadow. It's the side of you that doesn't fit the story you've built for yourself. The anger you suppress. The envy you rationalize. The desires you pretend you've outgrown. The cruelty that flashes when no one's watching. The shadow isn't evil. It's human. It's you, uncensored. And the more you deny it, the more it controls you. Society trains us to become half people. From childhood, we're told what's acceptable, what emotions to feel, what roles to play, what masks to wear. We learn that to be loved, we must be good. But goodness, in the eyes of the world, often means obedience. So we cut away pieces of ourselves. We bury the impulses that don't fit the mold. We silence the parts of us that scream when things don't make sense. And slowly, we become strangers to ourselves, well-behaved, polished, and deeply fractured. But here's the truth. What you refuse to face within, you will project onto others. You'll see arrogance where there is confidence, weakness where there is vulnerability, evil where there is simply fear. The shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It leaks out in sarcasm, in judgment, in addiction, in self-sabotage. It becomes the voice that tells you you're not enough. It becomes the habits that ruin your relationships. It becomes the life you never wanted, but somehow ended up living. Jung believed that true transformation begins not in chasing the light, but in owning the dark. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim power, not the kind of power that dominates others, but the power to become whole, to stop lying to yourself, to confront what you're capable of, not just the beautiful, but the brutal. And make no mistake, this isn't about perfection, it's about honesty. Because only when you see your full self, your rage, your lust, your resentment, can you choose to act freely rather than react unconsciously. Modern culture encourages avoidance. We are told to stay positive, to manifest light, to raise our vibrations. But Jung called that spiritual inflation, using pretty words to avoid the truth. Real growth is bloody, it's uncomfortable. It requires looking in the mirror and admitting, I am both the villain and the victim of my life story. Shadow work is not self-improvement, it's self-confrontation. It's the moment you stop asking, how do I become better? And start asking, who have I been pretending not to be? Because the war is not out there, it's in you. And only those brave enough to enter the battlefield of their own psyche will ever know what it means to be free. Long before you learned your name, before you had language to describe the world, something deeper was already shaping you. Carl Jung called them archetypes, universal patterns rooted in the human psyche. Not learned, but inherited. Not taught, but activated. The hero, the victim, the mother, the rebel, the savior, the trickster. These aren't just characters in myth and film. They're the mental blueprints behind how we see the world and how we see ourselves. They live in our unconscious, waiting to be triggered by the right story, the right crisis, the right cultural moment. Jung didn't invent archetypes. He simply named what had always been there. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Think about how society frames life. Be the hero, conquer the odds, win the prize, or suffer as the victim, feel wronged, seek revenge, or be the martyr. Sacrifice for the greater good, die for the cause. Our entire social fabric runs on archetypal energy, and the more we absorb media, culture, and ideology without awareness, the more these roles become scripts we unconsciously follow. But here's the twist. Someone is always directing the play. Advertisers, politicians, media platforms. They understand the power of archetypes better than most psychologists. They know how to package fear, how to sell you hope, how to make you identify with a movement, a product, a label, by activating the right story inside your head. And suddenly, your values aren't yours. Your enemies aren't chosen. Your beliefs aren't thought through. They're installed. This is psychological programming, conditioning masked as culture. And the scariest part? The more emotionally charged the story, the deeper the installation. A soldier isn't just a person. He's the hero, fighting evil. A citizen questioning the system? That's the rebel, a threat to order. A nation under pressure? Now it's the victim, justifying any response in the name of justice. These patterns play out again and again because they work, because they bypass logic and speak directly to the unconscious. You don't choose them, they choose you, unless you know how to see them, unless you pause, reflect, and ask, whose story am I living? Which archetype have I become without noticing? And more importantly, who benefits from that? Because once you understand that these aren't just symbols, they're psychological code, you begin to see the invisible strings, and only then can you begin to cut them. If everything you've been taught to believe about yourself might be a lie, then what comes next? Carl Jung didn't just diagnose the illness of the modern psyche, he offered a path out. He called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, beneath all the roles, expectations, projections, and masks. But don't confuse this with finding yourself. This isn't a journey of addition, it's one of subtraction. You don't discover the self by looking for it. You uncover it by dismantling everything that isn't you. The false identities, the societal programming, the internalized voices that tell you what's acceptable and what's not. Individuation is rebellion, not against the world, but against the version of you the world wants you to be. It begins in silence, away from the noise, the feed, the dopamine loops. In the quiet, something strange happens. The voice in your head gets louder and more honest. You start to hear what you actually think. You start to notice what you've been avoiding. You begin to feel emotions you've buried for years, sometimes decades. And that's the first sign that rewiring has begun. You're no longer outsourcing your identity to systems that profit from your confusion. Jung believed that each person is born with a unique psychological blueprint, but to activate it, to live it, you must break away from the collective. That's why individuation is rare, because it's hard, because it's lonely, because it demands that you give up fitting in order to belong to yourself. The world tells you to chase goals, wealth, status, perfection. Individuation asks, why? Who gave you those definitions of success? What if you're chasing something that doesn't belong to you just because you never paused long enough to question it? This is where the transformation happens. When you stop reacting and start reflecting. When you stop asking, how do I get what I want? And start asking, what part of me wants this? And is it even real? You begin to spot your own illusions. You see how much of your suffering came from trying to be someone else. You see how much of your anxiety came from betraying your own intuition. You see that the prison was always inside, and the key was never outside. Individuation is not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness means integrating everything you are: the light, the shadow, the wounds, the wisdom, the rage, the wonder. You stop cutting yourself into socially acceptable pieces. You stop explaining yourself. You start owning your contradictions. You stop asking permission. And something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel a sense of clarity. A weight lifts, not because the world changed, but because you no longer need to play a part in its illusion. You see the scripts being handed to you, and you choose not to act. You see the archetypes being activated, and you choose not to perform. You become you, unfiltered, and suddenly your mind is not a battlefield. It's a temple, not every day, not every moment, but more than before, and that's enough. That's the rewiring Jung promised. Not perfection, not enlightenment, but something far more dangerous to a world addicted to conformity: self-possession. Jung didn't live to see smartphones, social media, or AI. But if he had, he would have called it the final evolution of the unconscious takeover. Because now, the invasion isn't just cultural, it's technological. The collective unconscious has gone digital. You're no longer just shaped by family, community, or myth. You're shaped by data flows and algorithms designed to exploit your deepest psychological triggers. What once emerged slowly through stories, religion, tradition, now happens instantly. Your fears are tracked, your desires measured, your insecurities sold back to you in high definition. And unlike past regimes, which used force to control thought, today's systems use persuasion disguised as personalization. You're not told what to believe. You're gently nudged, recommended, fed, reassured. But the outcome is the same. You are no longer a conscious chooser, you're a reactive consumer. Carl Jung warned about mass identification, the loss of self in the group, the ideology, the wave. Today, that wave is viral, literally. Ideas spread not because they are true, but because they are contagious. Beliefs aren't formed through reflection. They're downloaded from headlines, hashtags, and 30-second videos. This is the psychic fragmentation of the modern age. 1,000 identities, 1,000 opinions, all shifting by the hour. No time to reflect, no time to think, just scroll, swipe, react. And the more you engage, the more the system learns how to bypass your rational mind. It doesn't need to convince you, it just needs to stimulate you. Fear gets more clicks than facts. Anger outperforms nuance. Distraction is more profitable than depth. And in that environment, individuation becomes an act of radical resistance. To think deeply, to feel slowly, to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it. These are not luxuries, they're acts of psychological defiance. Because make no mistake, the new unconscious isn't only internal, it's engineered. We are now uploading our shadows into the digital world. Our projections, our envy, our rage, our craving for validation. It all gets absorbed, repackaged, and amplified. And the system doesn't care who you become, only that you stay engaged. So the question Jung would ask today isn't just, who are you? He'd ask, how much of you is real, and how much of you is just code that someone else wrote? Until you can answer that, the mind isn't yours. But it can be. You've spent your life being shaped by stories you didn't choose, by systems you didn't create, by voices that told you who to be, long before you even knew you had a choice. And that's not your fault. But staying asleep now, that is. Carl Jung didn't offer shortcuts. He didn't promise that awareness would make life easier. In fact, he warned that waking up often makes life harder because it means carrying the weight of your own mind. No one to blame, no roles to hide behind, just you, and the raw, terrifying freedom of being conscious in a world that thrives on automation. To reclaim yourself is not some motivational slogan. It is war, a quiet inner war against passivity, distraction, and psychological possession. And in that war, there are no medals, only moments. Moments when you catch yourself before reacting. Moments when you choose integrity over image. Moments when you stop performing and simply exist. That is real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to finally know what you truly want and why. So what now? You go back into the world, but differently. Eyes open, mind grounded, no longer trying to win at someone else's game, but walking your own path, even if no one else sees it. Because the truth is, most people never wake up. They live entire lives inside someone else's script. They defend their chains. They call it safety. They call it identity. But if you've made it this far, If something in you moved during these minutes, it means the script is already breaking. You've begun to see behind the mask, and once you see, you can't unsee. So now it's your turn. You've been handed the mirror. The question is, will you look?